Hello, my friends. It is 9 o'clock. I still have not had dinner yet. I've had one heck of a busy day. I'm sorry. I wanted to grab my tea, and I'm chomping down a granola bar quick. I hope everybody's doing good. We started our last full week of school, and I know for the seniors out there, the graduation walkthroughs began today, which, I know there's some controversy there, but I think it's just about the best we can do right now. The governor yesterday said graduations can happen, but no more than 150 people can attend the graduation. So apparently, though, looking at the schools across the state, most of the schools are like, yeah, we're still not having graduation. So, anyways, I think it's the best we can do. I am, we'll talk more news later, but I am super excited, my friends. We're starting book 4. I hope you guys liked I am number 4. And again, I hope that it encourages you to keep reading the series or to go out there and find something else. I don't really care what people read. I just want people to read. I think it's important. Our keeping our bodies in shape and keeping our minds in shape is something that I think we need to do as humans. I don't run. I don't do Pilates. I don't do whatever the hip thing is, but I exercise my body every single day. And I read every single. Oh my! The cat's going nuts. And I read every day. So I encourage you guys to keep reading, whatever it is. All right. And if you see that thing flickering behind me, it's okay. I just put a candle on earlier to set the mood. I don't know what mood a candle would set for us reading, but here we go. My name is Marina, chapter 1. My name is Marina, as of the sea, but I wasn't called that until much later. In the beginning, I was known merely as Seven, one of the 9 surviving guard from the planet Lorian, the fate of which was and still is left in our hands. Those of us who aren't lost, those of us are still alive. I was 6 when we landed, when the ship jolted to a halt on Earth. Even at my young age, I sensed how much was at stake for us. 9 CPAN, 9 guard. And that, our only chance, waited for us here. We had entered the planet's atmosphere in the midst of a storm of our own creation. And as our feet found Earth for the very first time, I remembered the wisps of steam that rolled off the ship and the goosebumps that covered my arms. I hadn't felt the wind in a year, and it was freezing outside. Someone was there waiting for us. I don't know who he was, only that he had handed each CPAN 2 sets of clothes and a large envelope. I still don't know what was in it. As a group, we huddled together, knowing we might never see each other again. Words were spoken, hugs were given, and then we split up, as we knew we must, walking in pairs in 9 different directions. I kept peering over my shoulder as the others receded into the distance until, very slowly, one by one, they all disappeared. And then it was just Adelina and me, alone. I realize now just how scared Adelina must have been. I remember boarding the ship headed to some unknown destination. I remember 2 or 3 different trains after that. Adelina and I kept to ourselves, huddled against each other in obscure corners, away from whoever might be around. We hiked from town to town, over mountains and across fields, knocking on doors that were slammed in our faces. We were hungry, tired, and scared. I remember sitting on the sidewalk begging for change. I remember crying instead of sleeping. I'm certain that Adelina gave away some of our precious gems from Lorien for nothing more than warm meals. So great was our need. Perhaps she gave them all away. And then we found this place in Spain. A stern looking woman I would have come to know as Sister Lucia answered the heavy oak door. She squinted at Adelina, taking in her disposition, the way her shoulders drooped. Do you believe in the word of God? The woman asked in Spanish, pursing her lips and narrowing her eyes in scrutiny. The word of the Lord is my vow, Adelina replied with a solemn nod. Excuse me. I don't know how she knew she knew this response. Perhaps she learned it when we stayed in a church basement weeks before, but it was the right one. Sister Lucia opened the door. We've been there ever since, 11 years in the stone convent with its musty rooms, drafty hallways, and hard floors like slabs of ice. Aside from the few visitors and the internet, aside from the few visitors, the internet is my only source to the world outside of the small town, and I search it constantly, looking for some indication that the others are out there, that they are searching, and maybe they are fighting. Some sign that I'm not alone, because at this point, I can't say that Adelina still believes, that she's still with me. Her attitude changed somewhere over the mountains. Maybe it was with the slam of one of the doors that shut a starving woman and her child out in the cold for another night. Whatever it was, Adelina seems to have lost the urgency of staying on the move, and her faith in the resurgence of Lorien seems to have been replaced by the faith shared by the convent sisters. I remember a distant shift in Adelina's eyes, her sudden speeches on the need of guidance and structure if we were to survive. My faith in Lorien remains intact. In India, a year and a half ago, 4 different people witnessed a boy move objects with his mind. While the significance behind the event was small at first, the boy's abrupt disappearance shortly thereafter created much buzz in the region, and a hunt for him began. As far as I know, he hasn't been found. A few months ago, there was news of a girl in Argentina who, in the wake of an earthquake, lifted a 5-ton slab of concrete to save a man trapped beneath it. And when news of their heroic act spread, she disappeared. Like the boy in India, she is still missing. Then there's the father-son duo making all the news in America, in Ohio, who the police are hunting after. The 2 allegedly demolished an entire school by themselves, killing 5 people in the process. They left no trace behind other than mysterious heaps of ash. It looks like a battle took place here. I don't know how else to explain it, the head investigator was quoted as saying, but make no mistake, we will soon get to the bottom of this, and we will soon find Henry Smith and his son John. Perhaps John Smith, if that's his real name, is merely a boy with a grudge who's been pushed too far. But I don't think that's the case. My heart races whenever his picture appears on my screen. I'm gripped with a profound desperation that I can't quite explain. I can feel it in my bones that he is one of us, and I know somehow that I must find him. Chapter 2. I perch my arms on the cold windowsill, and I watch the snowflakes fall from the dark sky and settle on the side of the mountain, which is dotted with pine, cork oak, and beech trees, with patches of cracky rock mixed throughout. The snow hasn't let up all day, and they say it will continue through the night. I can barely see beyond the edge of town to the north. The world's lost in a white haze. During the day, when the sky is clear, it's possible to see the watery blue smudge of the Bay of Biscay, but not in this weather, and I can't help but wonder what might lurk in that white beyond my line of sight. I look behind me in the high-ceilinged, drafty room. There are 2 computers. To use one, we must add our name to a list and wait our turn. At night, there is a 10-minute time limit if somebody is waiting, 20 minutes if there isn't. The two girls using them have now been on for half an hour each, and my patience is running thin. I haven't checked the news since this morning when I snuck in before breakfast. At that time, nothing new about John Smith had been reported, but I'm almost shaking in anticipation to see what might have sprung up since then. Some new discovery has been, First John, uncovered each day since the story first broke. Santa Teresa is a convent that doubles as an orphanage for girls. I'm now the oldest of 37, a distinction that I've held for 6 months after the last girl who turned 18 left. At 18, we must all make the choice, either strike out on our own or forge a life within the church. The birthday Adelena and I created for me when we arrived in less than 5 months away, and that's when I turn 18 too. Of all who've reached 18, not a single girl has stayed, and I can't blame them. Like the others, I have every intention of leaving this prison behind, whether or not Adelena comes with me or not. And it's hard to imagine she will. The convent itself is built entirely of stone in 1510, and is much too large for the small number of us who live here. Most of the rooms stand empty, and those that aren't are imbued with a damp, earthy feel, and our voices echo in the ceilings in the back. The convent rests atop the highest hill, overlooking the village that shares the same name. Nestled deep within the Picos de Europa mountains of northern Spain, or the Pyrenees, as we call them. The village, like the convent, is made of rock, with many structures built straight into the mountainside. Walking down the town's main roads, Calais Principal, it's impossible not to be inundated by the disrepair. Oh, excuse me. It's as though this place was forgotten by time, and the passing centuries have turned most everything the shades of mossy green and brown, while a pervasive smell of mildew hangs in the air. It's been 5 years since I've started begging Adelina to leave, to keep moving like we were instructed to. I'm going to be getting my legacy soon, and I don't want to discover them here, with all of these girls and nuns around. I told her, but she refused, quoting La Biblia Reina Valera, that we must stand still for salvation. I've begged every year since, and every year she looks at me with blank eyes and talks me down with a different religious quote. But I know my salvation does not lie here. Past the church gates and down the gently sloping hill, I could see the faint dimness of the town lights. In the midst of this blizzard, they look like floating halos, though I can't hear from the music from either of the two cantinas. I'm sure both of them are packed. Aside from those, there is a restaurant, a cafe, a market, a bodega, and various vendors that line Calais Principal, most mornings and afternoons. Towards the bottom of the hill on the southern edge of town is a brick school we all attend. My head snaps around when the bell rings. Prayers are minutes away. Followed directly by bed. Panic sweeps through me. I have to know if anything new has been reported. Perhaps John's been caught. Perhaps the police have found something else at the demolished school. Something, originally overlooked. Even if there's nothing new at all, I have to know. I never get to sleep otherwise. I fix a hard stare at Gabriela Garcia, Gabby for short, who sits at one of the computers. Gabby's 16 and very pretty with long dark hair and brown eyes. She always dresses slutty when she's outside the convent, wearing tight shirts that show off her pierced navel. Every morning she dresses in loose baggy clothes, but the second we're out of sight of the sisters, she removes them, revealing a tight, skimpy outfit underneath. Then she spends the rest of the walk to school applying makeup and redoing her hair. It's the same with her 4 friends, 3 of them who also live here. And when the days end, they wipe their faces clean during the walk back and they redress in their original clothes. What? Gabby asks in a snotty voice, staring at me. I'm writing an email. I've been waiting longer than 10 minutes, I say. And you're not writing an email. You're looking at guys with their shirts off. So what? Are you going to tell on me, Tattletale? She says mockingly. The girl beside her, whose name is Hilda, but who most kids in the school call La Gorda, the fat one, behind her back, never to her face, laughs. They're an inseparable pair, Gabby and La Gorda. I bite my tongue and I turn my back to the window, folding my arms across my chest. I'm seething inside, partly because I need to get to the computer and partly because I never know how to respond when Gabby mocks me. There are 4 minutes left. My impatience used and full on desperation. There could be news right now, breaking news, but I have no way of knowing because these selfish jerks won't give up one of the computers. 3 minutes left. I'm nearly shaking with anger. Then an idea pops into my head, and a grin plays across my lips. It's risky, but it's worth it if it works. I pivot just enough to see Gabby's chair in my peripheral vision. I take a deep breath and, focusing all my energy on her chair, use my telekinesis to jerk it to the left. Then I quickly thrust it right so hard it nearly topples over. Gabby jumps up and yelps. I look at her in mock surprise. What? LaGorda asks. I don't know. It felt like somebody just kicked my chair or something. Did you feel anything? No, LaGorda says. And as soon as the word is uttered, I move her chair a few centimeters backwards, then jerk it to the right, all in the while remaining at my spot by the window. Both of the girls scream this time. I thrust Gabby's chair, then LaGorda's again, and without giving their computer screens a second glance, they flee the room, screaming as they go. That's pretty cool. Pretending there's some ghosts? Huh, Stella? Why do you always bite whenever I scratch you? Huh? Oh, all right. Yes, I say, rushing to the computers Gabby was using and quickly type it. The web address of a news site I've deemed most reliable. Then I wait impatiently for the page to load. The old computers, combined with the slow internet here, are the bane of my existence. The browser goes white, and line by line the page forms. When a quarter of it is loaded, the final bell rings. 1 minute until prayers. I'm inclined to ignore the bell, even at the risk of being punished. At this point, I don't really care. 5 more months, I whisper to myself. Half of the page is now up, revealing the top of John Smith's face, his upturned eyes, which are dark and confident, though within them there's a sense of discomfort that seems almost out of place. I lean on the edge of my seat, waiting for the excitement bubbling up inside me, causing my hands to tremble. Come on, I say to the screen, trying in vain to hurry up. Come on, come on, come on. Marina! A voice breaks from the open doorway. I jerk around to see Sister Dora, a portly woman who's the head cook in the kitchen, staring daggers at me. This is nothing new. She stares daggers at everyone who walks through the lunch line holding a tray, as though we needed sustenance in our personal affront. She purses her lips together in a perfectly straight line, then narrows her eyes. Come, now, and I mean right now. I sigh, knowing I have no chance but to go. I clear the browser's history and close it, then follow Sister Dora down the dark hallway. There is something new on that screen. I just knew it. Why else would John's face have taken up nearly the entire page? A week and a half is long enough for any news to turn stale, and for him to command so much of the screen means there's something significant and new piece of information. We walk to Santa Teresa's nave, which is huge. Towering pillars led to a high vaulted ceiling, and stained glass windows line the walls. Wooden pews run the length of the open room and can seat nearly 300 people. Sister Dora and I are the last to enter. I sit alone in one of the center pews. Sister Lucia, who opened the door to Adelina and me when we first arrived, and who still runs the convent, stands at the pulpit, closes her eyes, lowers her head, and presses her hands together in front of her. Everyone else does the same. Padre Divinio. The prayer begins in somber unison. Que nos conglega y nos protega en su amar. Or en su amar. I tune out and I look at the back of the head. I look off the head. Sorry. I tune it out and look at the back of the heads before me, all of which are bowed in concentration, or just bowed. My eyes find Adelina sitting in the very first row of 6 pews in front of me, and slightly to the right. She's on her knees, deeply meditative, her brown hair pulled into a tight braid that falls into the middle of her back. She doesn't look up once. She doesn't try to find me at the back of the room, like she used to during the first few years here. A covert smile on each of our faces as our eyes met, acknowledging our shared secret. We still share that secret, but somehow along the way, Adelina has stopped acknowledging it. Somewhere along the way, the plan to bide our time until we felt strong enough and safe enough to leave has been replaced with Adelina's desire to simply stay, or her fear not to leave. Okay. Before the news of John Smith, which I told Adelina about when it broke, it had been months since we last talked about our mission. In September, I had shown her my 3rd scar, the 3rd warning that said another guard had died, and that she and I were one step closer to being hunted and killed by the Magadorians. She had acted like it didn't exist, like it didn't mean that we both that we both know what it means. Upon hearing the news about John, she merely rolled her eyes and told me to stop believing in fairy tales. En el nombre de Padre, y del Hijo, y del Espíritu Santo, Amen, they say, and everyone in the room makes the sign of the cross in unison, with this last sentence, myself included, to keep up the appearances: forehead, chest, left shoulder, right shoulder. I had been asleep, dreaming of running down a mountain with my arms at my sides, as if I was about to take flight, when I had been woken by the pain and the glow of the 3rd scar wrapping itself around my lower leg. The light had woken several girls in the room, but thankfully not the attending sister. The girls thought I had had a flashlight and a magazine under the covers, and that was breaking the rules of curfew. On the bed next to mine, Elena, a quiet 16-year-old girl with jet black hair, she often sticks in her mouth when speaking, had thrown a pillow at me. My flesh had begun to bubble, and the pain had been so intense that I had to bite the edge of my blanket to remain quiet. I couldn't help but cry because somewhere number 3 had lost his or her life. There were 6 of us left now. Tonight, I file out of the nave with the rest of the girls and head to our sleeping quarters filled with creaky twin beds, evenly spaced apart. But in my mind, I'm hatching a plan to compensate for the hard beds and the concrete chill of every room. The linens are soft, but the blankets heavy, the only real luxury we're afforded. My bed is in the back corner farthest from the door, which is the most sought-after spot. It's the quietest, and it took me a long time to get it, moving one bed closer as each girl left. The lights are shut off once everyone is settled in. I lie on my back and I stare at the faint, jagged outline of the high ceiling. An occasional whisper breaks the silence, followed immediately by the attending sister shushing whomever it came from. I keep my eyes open, waiting impatiently for everyone to fall asleep. After an hour, the whispers fade, replaced by the soft sounds of sleep. But I don't dare risk it yet, too soon. Another 15 minutes and still no sounds. Then I can't stand it any longer. Uh-oh. I hold my breath and inch my legs over the edge of my bed, listening to the rhythm of Elena's breathing beside me. My feet find the icy floor and turn cold instantly. I stand slowly to keep the bed from creaking and then tiptoe across the room and towards the door, taking my time, being careful not to bump beds. I reach the open doorway and I rush out into the hall and down to the computer room. I pull out the chair and I push in the computer's power button. A frigid waiting, I fidget waiting for the computer to boot up and keep peering towards the hallway to see if anyone has followed. I'm finally able to type the web address and the screen goes white. Then two pictures take shape in the center of the page, surrounded by text with a top headline in bold black letters too blurry to read. Two images now. I wonder what changed since I tried to check earlier. And then at last, they come into focus. International terrorists? Question mark. John Smith with his square jaw, shaggy dark blonde hair, and blue eyes fills the left side of the screen, while his father, or more likely C-Pan, Henry, takes up the right. What's there isn't a photo, but a black and white artist sketch done in pencil. I skim the details. I already know. Demolished school, 5 deaths, abrupt disappearance, and then come the breaking news now being reported. In a bizarre twist, FBI investigators today uncovered what is believed to be the tools of a professional counterfeiter. Several machines typically used for the creation of documents were found in Paradise, Ohio, home rented by Henry and John Smith, in a hatch beneath the floorboards of the master bedroom, leading investigators to consider possible links to terrorism. Creating a local uproar within the Paradise community, Henry and John Smith are now considered to be a threat to national security. Fugitives and investigators are asking for any and all information that might lead to their whereabouts. I scroll back to John's image. When my gaze meets his, my hands begin to shake. His eyes, even in this sketch, there's something familiar about them. How could I know them? How could I know them if not from a year-long journey that brought us here? Nobody convinced me now that he isn't one of the 6 remaining guards, still alive in this foreign world. I lean back and I blow my bangs out of my eyes, wishing I could go in search of John for myself. Of course, Henry and John Smith are able to elude police, but kept hidden for 11 years now, just as Adelina and I have. But how can I possibly hope to be the one that finds them when the whole world is looking? How can any of us hope to come together? The eyes of the Magadorians are everywhere. I have no idea how 1 or 3 were found, but I believe they located 2 because of a blog post he or she had written. I had found it. Then I sat there for 15 minutes thinking how best to respond without giving myself away. Though the message itself had been obscure, it was very obvious to those who'd been looking. 9, now 8, are the rest of you out there. It had been posted by an account called 2. My fingers found the keyboard and I typed a quick response. Just before I hit the post button, the page refreshed. Somebody else had typed first. "We are here," it read. My mouth had dropped open, and I stared, in utter shock. Hope flooded through me from those 2 brief messages. But just as my fingers had typed a different reply, a bright glow appeared at my feet, and the sizzling sound of burning flesh reached my ears, followed closely by a searing pain so great that I dropped to the floor and writhed in agony, screaming at the top of my lungs for Adelina, holding my hands over my ankles so no one else could see. When Adelina arrived and realized what had happened, I pointed to the screen, but it was blank. Both posts had been deleted. I looked away I looked away from John Smith's familiar eyes on the screen. Beside the computer, still a small flower. Beside the computer sits a small flower that's been forgotten. It's wilted and tired, shrunken down to half its normal height, a brown, crispy tinge on the edge of its leaves. Several petals have dropped, now dry and crinkled, on the desk around the pot. The flower isn't dead yet, but it's not far off. I lean forward and I cup my hands around it, move my face near so that my lips brush against the edge of its leaves. Then I blow hot air over it. An icy feeling shoots down my spine, and in response, life bursts through the small flower. It springs upward as a verdant green floods the leaves and stalk the new petals bloom, colorless at first, then turning a brilliant purple. A mischievous grin sprouts across my face, and I can't help but think of how the sisters would react if they were to see such a thing. But I'll never let them. It would be misinterpreted, and I don't want to be cast out into the cold. I'm not ready for that. Soon, but not just yet. I turn off the computer and I hurry back to bed, with thoughts of John Smith somewhere out there swim in my head. Be safe and stay hidden, I think. We'll find each other soon. All right, we got a little time left. I'm going to start chapter 3. If that's okay with you guys. Ugh, I'm just going to refresh my wonderful beverage. Beverage. I'm such a goofball. Yes, I would like to have a beverage. Okay, chapter 3. A low whisper finds me. The voice is cold, and I can't seem to move, but I listen intently. I'm not asleep anymore, but I'm not awake either. I'm paralyzed. As the whispers increase, my eyes are whisked away through the impenetrable darkness of my motel room. Oh, that's one of the cool things. And I noticed this. And I probably can't show you. Well, I don't know. Maybe you can tell. Nah, you can't. Maybe. I don't know. Yeah, you can. See that? Now watch this. It's a different font. So depending on who is the main dude or dudette guard, the font is different. So my eyes are whisked away through the impenetrable darkness of my hotel room. The electricity I feel as the vision breaks above my bed reminds me of my first legacy, Lumen, lit up my palms in Paradise, Ohio. Back when Henry was still here, still alive. But Henry's gone now, and he's not coming back. Even in this state, I can't escape that reality. I completely enter the vision above me, blazing through the darkness with my hands turned on, but the glow is swallowed by the shadows. Then I snap to a halt. Everything falls silent. I lift my hands in front of me and I touch nothing. My feet off the ground, floating in a great void. More whispering and a language I don't recognize, but somehow I still understand it. The words burst forth anxiously. The darkness fades and the world I'm in turns a shade of gray on its way to a white so bright I have to squint to see. A mist drifts in front of me and filters away, revealing a large open room with candles lining the walls. I don't know what went wrong, a voice says, clearly shaken. The room is long and wide, a size of a small football field. An acrid smell of sulfur burns my nostrils, and it makes my eyes water. The air is hot and stuffy, and then I see them at the far end of the room, two figures shrouded in shadows, one much bigger than the other and menacing even from a distance. They got away. Somehow they got away. I don't know how. I move forward and I feel a sort of calm that sometimes comes in dreams. And when you're aware, you're asleep and nothing can really hurt you. Step by step, nearing the growing shadows. All of them killed, along with 3 piken and 2 crawls, the smaller of the 2 says, standing with fidgeting hands besides the larger man. We had them. We were about to, comes the voice, but the other cuts him off. He scans the air to see what he's really sensed. I stop. I stand motionless and I hold my breath. Then he finds me, and a shudder runs up my spine. John, somebody says, and the voice is a distant echo. The larger figure comes towards me. He towers over me, 20 feet tall, muscular, a chiseled jaw. His hair isn't like the other, but cut short instead. His skin is tan. Our eyes stay locked, and he slowly approaches, 30 feet away, 20. He stops 10 feet short. My pendant grows heavy, and the chain cuts into my neck. Around his throat, like a collar, I notice a grotesque purple scar. I've been expecting you, he says, his voice level and calm. He lifts his right arm and he pulls a sword from the sheath on his back. It comes alive at once, keeping its shape, while the metal turns nearly liquid. The wound in my shoulder from the soldier's dagger during the battle in Ohio screams with pain, as though I'm being stabbed all over again. I fall to my knees. It's been a very long time, he says. I don't know what you're talking about, I say in a language I've never spoken before. I want to leave immediately, whatever this place is. I try to rise, but it's as if I'm suddenly stuck in the ground. Don't you? He asks. John, I hear again from somewhere in the periphery. The Magadorian doesn't seem to notice, and there's something about his gaze that holds my own. I can't look away. I'm not supposed to be here, I say. My voice sounds watery. Everything dims until it's just the 2 of us and nothing else. I can make you disappear if that's what you want, he says, slashing a figure 8 with the sword, leaving a stark white streak hanging in the air where the blade passes through. Then he charges, his sword held high and cracking with power. He swings and it comes down like a bullet aimed for my throat. And I know that there's nothing I can do but to stop the blow from decapitating me. John, the voice screams again. My eyes whip open. 2 hands grip me hard by the shoulders. I'm covered in sweat and out of breath. I focus first on Sam standing over me, then on Six. With her stark hazel eyes that sometimes look blue and sometimes green, kneeling beside me, appearing tired and worn as though I just woke her, which I probably did. What the hell is that about? Sam asks. I shake my head, letting the vision dissipate, and I take in my surroundings. The room is dark with curtains drawn, and I'm lying in the same bed I spent the last week and a half in, healing from the battle wounds. Six has been recovering beside me, and neither of us have left this place since we arrived, relying on Sam to head out for food and supplies. A shabby motel room with 2 full beds off the main street in Trucksville, North Carolina. To rent a room, Sam had to use one of the 17 driver's licenses Henry created for me before he was killed. And luckily, the old man at the front desk was too busy watching TV to study the photograph. Situated on the northwestern edge of the state, the motel is a 15-minute drive from both Virginia and Tennessee, a location chosen mainly because we had traveled as far as we could go, given the extent of our injuries. Both our wounds have slowly healed, and our strength is finally returning. You were talking in a foreign language I've never heard before, Sam says. I think you made it up, dude. No, he was talking Magadorian, Six corrects him, and even a little Lorik. Really, I ask? That's totally weird. Six walks to the window and pulls back the right side of the curtains. What were you dreaming about? I shake my head. I'm not really sure. I was dreaming, but I wasn't dreaming, Having visions, I guess, and they were about them. We were about to have a battle, but I don't know, too weak or confused or something. I look up at Sam, who was frowning and looking at the TV. What? Bad news, he sighs, shaking his head. What? I sit up, wiping the sleep from my eyes. Sam nods to the front of the room, and I turn to the glow of the television. My face takes up the entire left half of the screen, while an artist rendering of Henry's is on the right. The drawing looks like him. His face seems sharp and haggard to the point of emaciation, giving him the appearance of being 20 years older than he really is, or was. As if being called a threat to national security or a terrorist wasn't bad enough, Sam says. They're now offering a reward. For me, I ask? For you and Henry. $100,000 for any information leading to your or Henry's capture. $250,000 if somebody brings either of you in on their own, Sam says. I've been on the run all my life, I say, rubbing my eyes. What difference does it make? Yeah, well, I haven't, and they're offering a reward for me too, Sam says. A measly 25,000 grand, if you can believe that. And I don't know how good of a fugitive I am. I've never done this before. I gingerly scoot out of the bed, still a little stiff, but I sit on the other bed and Sam sits on the other bed and places his head in his palms. You're with us, though, Sam. We have your back, I say. I'm not worried, he says into his chest. Okay, we're going to call it quits there. We'll pick up at the top of the page. So now we have met 3 of the Lorik, right? We've met 4. I am number 4. We've met 6. And then now we've been introduced to 7. And 2 of the 3 are girls, and both are older than John. So I think John's 15, but he's got a, I think his license says he's 16, right? And then 7, who's in Spain, is almost 18, like 5 or 6 months, right, away from being 18. So, all right, we know half the team, right? We know half the team. And 7 can, and I'm not 100% sure, right, what the power is, but she like blows some air onto this dead flower and it comes back to life. So that's pretty cool. So, pardon me, super strength, super speed, telekinesis, lumens, fire resistant. 6 can control the elements, and 7 can bring things back to life, right? And we don't know. Does that mean like if there was a dead dog, she could go and bring it back to life? Because it says that the flower wasn't totally dead, right? It wasn't totally dead. So maybe like things have to be a little bit alive or not totally dead for her to be able to bring them back. So anywho, that's where we are. All right, my friends. So a lot of news today, a lot of Capital District news. So this is day 100 of this COVID stuff, right? So pretty soon, oh my goodness, excuse me. Pretty soon we will have reached a third of a year, right? So roughly 122 days. Yeah, roughly 122 days is a third of a year. So I guess by the end of the month, right? So what have we heard? A lot of stuff from New York State. So one of the things that is going on is that school districts in New York State are saying, listen, here's the dealio. Andrew Cuomo, governor. We just opened up professional services. You wanted us to mail every voter an absentee ballot and with a self-addressed envelope. And you have to have this secured envelope in it too. But here's the deal. All the printing shops are closed. So how the heck do we do this? We have to print thousands and thousands and thousands of them. So I got mine from Middleburg Friday. Friday. No. Yes, Friday. And they're due Tuesday in person. So if you're going to drop them off, you have to have them in at 5. And they were supposed to, if you were mailing them, you were supposed to have them mailed in by 5, or by that, by the end of mail that day. So the governor signed an executive order pushing it back. So you actually are going to have until 10 p.m. to drop it off, and then you're going to have another week to mail it in. So that means school districts won't know about their budget votes for another week. I'm interested to see what happens, my friends, because I think there are a lot of people that are not totally happy with school districts right now. And if you remember, school districts and libraries that have budgets had 2 options. And the option was, Miss Stella Bell is coming back. Roll over your budget from last year and go with the same budget, or do this mailing. So obviously, if the school district is doing the mailing, then they're not rolling over the budget, which means there's going to be a budget increase. So we'll see what happens, but that seems to be a mess. So today, camping opened up in New York State. So to reserve a site at a campground in New York State, that system went online. And the interesting thing is that the reservation system had already opened for next year, and it just opened up for this year. So people had already been reserving for summer of 2021. Now they can start to reserve for summer 2020. So, we'll see. We shall see what happens with that. I have a feeling people probably went crazy today and crashed the system. It's a good sign, though. So we had talked about yesterday, there had been a peaceful protest in Troy, and Christina had mentioned last night that she had gone to it, and apparently the Troy police had made an arrest, not of any of the peaceful protesters, but apparently there had been some agitators there, and one of the people that they arrested, they had actually arrested on a weapons charge. And today in Clifton Park, and apparently this was started by high school students from a couple different high schools, about 1,000 teenagers marched down 146, one of the main roads there in Clifton Park, to protest. It was a Black Lives Matter march. And apparently they were escorted by the police and everything. Peaceful protest, but, kudos to the young people for getting out there and getting their voices heard. And these protests are still spreading. They're all over the country. They're in big cities, and they're in little towns, and they're in little villages. And a lot of places, like we talked about last night, Green Island, Watervliet, Manans, all set curfews. Major cities have set curfews, and people are going, yep, nope. And they're just going out, and they're still holding these marches. So in LA, apparently thousands of people were marching past the curfew. And what they did is I'm sure you guys have seen this. They lay down and they put their hands behind their back like George Floyd was. And, or at some of the protests, I've seen people taking a knee similar to Colin Kaepernick. And Apparently, the LA Police Department said, "Yeah, we're not going to be arresting. Oh, we're not going to be arresting these people." So, okay, yeah, they have the right to protest, but when it's a tough call. All right, if you don't arrest people for breaking this law, are you going to be arresting people for breaking that law? Right. So tough call, but they've decided that they're not going to do it. So what we did see today on a local and national level is that the Albany City Council apparently has now written some regulations restricting the type of restraints that the police can use when they've arrested someone and they're detaining someone. And then the New York State Assembly voted on the Anti-Chokehold Act. And that does not now mean because it doesn't mean it's a law. The Assembly voted and passed. The Senate has to vote and pass it. But Governor Cuomo has said that he will sign that bill if it hits his desk, right? Which it's gonna. The state assembly is controlled by Democrats. The state Senate is controlled by Democrats. Our governor is a Democrat, right? So I think it likely that this bill is going to become law. It's gonna hit his desk. So, and again, this is now all police in New York State are not going to be able to do certain restraints when when they've arrested and they're trying to detain someone. And I'm assuming it's also going to cover correctional officers. I'm assuming, but we'll see. We'll see what comes of that. I could be wrong because I don't know. Jails, I don't know. I'll look it up when it actually passes. So with all these protests, though, my friends, it is clear that there is a direct correlation between the growth in numbers of people getting COVID and the protests in the states and in the areas where the biggest protests are taking place. This is where the numbers are starting to take off. And there are a ton of protests happening in New York. And I just found out today there's been 2 deaths in Schoharie County, but apparently in just the last few days in Schoharie County, there have been 3 new cases. So we haven't had a ton of cases, only 2 deaths. But, one of the things that I've always wondered about what's happened with all this is travel within the state, right? I drive to the Capital District every day to teach. I'm going from a place that has had very few cases. I think Schoharie County has had less cases than Albany County has had deaths. So am I putting risk to my neighbors by coming into Albany as I was? Of course, I haven't been doing that recently. So I don't know. But cases are rising faster than they have. The rate is faster than it has been. Again, what part of our country is in the South and the West? But the World Health Organization today also announced that the increase in COVID cases is the highest it's been since the pandemic started across the world. So this is far from being over. Okay, so let's talk about a national level. You guys all know that the legislative branch is made up of the House of Representatives and it's made up of the Senate. Well, the House of Representatives is controlled by Democrats. The Senate is controlled by Republicans. Today, the Democrats in the House of Representatives voted on a bill. I thought I wrote it down. I guess I didn't. First, what they did is they took a moment of silence, and many of them took a knee, and then they debated and voted on this bill, which is they want national legislation to change the regulations for police officers, how they do their job, how they restrain some suspects. And number one, what they want to do is they want to limit protections, meaning that police officers, when they become police officers, as they serve as police officers, there are unions and there are regulations that protect them if something happens wrong, if they use excessive force. Well, now this new national legislation, if it became law, I don't know that it's going to, would say, well, we're going to take these protections away. It would also create a national database for policemen who have used excessive force. So let's say that I'm a police officer here in Schoharie County. I do something in the line of duty. I lose my job. I then move to Idaho. And I say, oh, hey, listen, I was a police officer, and here's my here are some recommendations, blah, 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 blah. Oh, well, look at all this experience you have and recommendations from the other police officers you worked with. Sure, we'll hire you. Well, now there's going to be a national database, so they can search me and they can say, oh, well, the reason you're not a police officer in Schoharie County anymore is because you shot two people, and then you did this to this person, whatever, right? The other thing is that it would ban racial profiling, which personally I don't think is a bad thing. But it would also increase the amount of body cameras. And if my memory serves, what many people in Congress want to do is that over a period of time, phase in that all law enforcement has to have a body camera on. So, this is a huge amount of infrastructure. This is a huge amount of body cameras, right? Is it like New York City has like 60,000 police officers? So think about New York City alone. I think it's like it's up there close to 60,000 police officers. Holy cow. Think about the body cams. Think about the computer servers that have to store all that video, because the body cams record into like a cloud. Holy cow, right? So putting that in place is going to take time. So, we'll see. We'll see if the Republicans in the Senate work with the Democrats in the Senate and approve that bill, and we'll see if the Donald signs it. The Donald came out and criticized it already, so I have a feeling he probably won't. And again, we know that you need a 2/3 majority to override a veto if the Donald was to veto it. But I don't know. I don't know. Maybe the Senate will look and say, if we change this and amend that, then yeah, maybe we'll go for it. But I don't know. A lot of people are still asking about unemployment is still not good. It's the second highest unemployment has been since the Great Depression. We have now we're officially been labeled as being in a recession. As a matter of fact, economists are now saying that the recession actually started about a month before the pandemic. So they say if you look at things and you go, wait, how do they know that now? Well, because you have to look at the economy over a period of time. You can't just look at it day by day, even week by week. You've got to look at it a cycle over months. And if you look at it at a cycle over months, they go, this is where the recession started. So the recession, the downturn in the economy began before COVID actually began. However, the stock market did okay today. The stock market is doing, I guess it had one of the best days it's had in a while, which is good, right? Which means people are confident. And the other thing that I saw, here's a little bit of international news for you. Apparently, New Zealand has now wiped out COVID. So the last case of COVID in New Zealand, that person has now recovered. So that's certainly a good sign. New Zealand is an island nation. It doesn't have a massive population. So being able to curtail the pandemic and get ahead of it is not as challenging as it is in the United States, but it's a good sign. It's a good sign. We can do it, right? We can. All right, my friends. So let's do it. This day in history. So on this day in 1861, Tennessee secedes from the Union. On this day in 1913, that's right, I did write two out of order. It's the first time in the history of the world that forensic evidence is used to help catch a murderer. And I read a little bit about this. This is actually kind of cool. So two men were walking down the street or walking down the road in Scotland, and they walk past a stone quarry, and they see that in the stone quarry are two bodies that are tied together. And apparently, kind of gruesome, but I believe it was two brothers. And so what happens is that when the inspector inspects the bodies, there is a type of fat that has grown. I guess that the your body, your muscle, if it's submerged in water or whatever, cold water, can actually turn into a certain type of fat. So, anyways, he was able to surmise that the boys, I believe it was two boys, had actually been in the water for a certain period of time. And from that, they were able to discover that it was actually, I guess, their father that had done this to them. But anyways, first time in world history, 1913, forensic evidence is used to capture a murderer. So on this day in 1949, the FBI, for the first time, releases a list of suspected communists that they believe are kind of running and controlling Hollywood, right? So all these different people in filmmakers and actors and screenwriters they're communists, and they're going to make movies that are going to influence, our kids and influence our country. And we need to keep an eye on them. Also on this day in 1949, which I think is kind of interesting, is George Orwell's book, 1984, is released. And I think, you know what? My son had to read it in the 8th grade. He read Animal Farm. I think at some point, maybe it was last year. I think maybe it was last year he had to read 1984 in school. I don't know if you guys have read that. I haven't read it in forever, or Animal Farm. I actually think I read Animal Farm in high school and in college. Excuse me, right? But it was kind of this look at, hey, this is what the world could possibly turn into. On this day in 1966, kind of lame, but I thought it was cool. The AFL and NFL announced that they were going to merge into one football conference or one football league. So there used to be two different football leagues. And in 1966, on this day, they announced that no longer they will be one league, and we are happy for that, right? What was the last year? Was it the 54th Super Bowl? I don't remember. 53rd. On this day in 1968, James Earl Ray is arrested. Who is James Earl Ray? James Earl Ray was the man who shot and killed Martin Luther King Jr., who you have an assignment about this week. All of you, it doesn't matter if you're juniors or seniors, you have an assignment about Dr. King. And I did not know this. I know that there was controversy. You know, if you guys know, John F. Kennedy, right, was assassinated in 1963. A lot of controversy about who paid for, who carried out the assassination. It seems rather likely that Lee Harvey Oswald more than likely did not act alone. Some people think maybe he may not have done anything at all. I think he was a part of it, but he may not have acted alone. And who really was behind the assassination? Well, apparently there's quite a bit of controversy about King as well. When they caught James Earl Ray, where was he? I believe he was. I think he was in London, and he was heading to Africa. And when they brought him back, he pled guilty. He said, "Yes, I did. I shot Dr. King." Then apparently he changed his plea and he said, "Well, actually, no, I didn't. What happened is." This was a conspiracy, and I didn't shoot him. Somebody else shot him. Blah blah blah. And apparently, for some time, he continued to claim that he didn't shoot him, and then apparently he had even convinced the King family at one point. I didn't read too much into it, but I guess there is quite a bit of controversy surrounding Dr. King's death and who was truly behind and who was the mastermind of his shooting. Okay, so on this day in 1984, Ghostbusters was released. So boy, what out of all those different things, that might be the most important of them all, right? The movie Ghostbusters was released, and I remember going to see that movie, and man, I was totally and completely scared. But what a great movie, and I think it's still a great movie today. They did that remake a couple years ago. Well, I guess it wasn't even really it wasn't a remake. It was almost like it was just another Ghostbusters movie because Bill Murray, right, was in it as himself. And I think they're making another new Ghostbusters movie with that new team. I think. I don't remember. I don't know. Sometimes there's not a lot of new stuff, good stuff out there. But anyways, guys, we started book 4, right? And it's a great book. I hope you guys are liking them. You seem to be because you're showing up, and I see a lot of people are watching the playbacks, which is great. And tomorrow night, we'll jump back in. We'll hopefully learn a little bit more about 7. John and 6 are healing up, and they're in North Carolina. So we'll see where they're going to head next. But, hang in there, guys. It looks like the weather this week is going to be pretty nice. Tried to get outside, get some exercise, stretch your legs, do a little more reading, get your work done, finish the school year strong. It's to me, again, I know I mentioned it, but I think it's just so important that we all finish, teachers, students, everybody. We just finish strong, knowing that, hey, we didn't let this get to us. We're not just going to take the easy path. We're going to finish this bad boy up, and we're going to have, we're going to look back and say we did the best that we could during that time. So, and personally, I think that's what life's about. So, anyways, my friends, keep running the marathon. Don't sprint. We'll get there. Be good, and I'll see you tomorrow night, 9 o'clock.